The blizzard hit Wyatt, Missouri on February 13th, 1873, turning the dusty frontier town into a frozen wasteland that nobody expected, and Violet Bradford knew she was going to die in that snowdrift before she even heard the outlaws coming. She had been traveling from her uncle's ranch outside town when her horse stumbled in the deepening snow, throwing her hard against a rocky outcrop. The mare bolted, leaving Violet alone with a twisted ankle and the wind howling through her thin wool coat. She dragged herself toward what looked like shelter, an overhang of rock and frozen earth, but the pain shooting up her leg made every movement agony. Snow pelted her face, stinging her cheeks until they went numb. She was 22 years old, unmarried despite her mother's constant attempts at matchmaking, and now she would freeze to death less than 3 miles from town. The sound of hoofbeats cut through the wind. Relief flooded through her chest until she saw them, 5 men on horseback, their faces wrapped in dark scarves, rifles slung across their backs. They spotted her immediately, and something about the way they dismounted told her these were not good Samaritans come to rescue a stranded woman. "Well, well," the tallest one said, pushing the scarf down to reveal a beard thick with ice. "What do we have here?" Violet pressed herself back against the snowdrift, her hand instinctively reaching for the small derringer she kept in her coat pocket. Her father had given it to her before he died, insisting every woman needed protection in Missouri. She had never fired it at a living person. "Leave me be," she said, hating how her voice shook. "I have nothing worth taking." The bearded man laughed, and the others joined in. "Maybe not in your pockets, sweetheart." He took a step closer. "But the Dawson Gang does not pass up opportunities. Jenkins, check if anyone followed her." One of the men scrambled up the rocks, scanning the white landscape. "Nobody for miles, Dawson. Storm's getting worse." Violet's mind raced. The Dawson Gang. She had heard the name whispered in town, stories of robberies and murders across 3 states. They had hit a bank in Kansas City just last week, killing 2 guards. Her fingers closed around the derringer, but 5 against 1 meant certain death even if she got a shot off. Dawson crouched in front of her, close enough that she could smell tobacco and unwashed skin. "Now, I am thinking a pretty thing like you comes from money. Maybe your people would pay to get you back. My father is dead. My mother has nothing. Then I guess you are just entertainment." His hand reached for her face. The gunshot cracked like thunder. Dawson's head snapped back, a red mist spraying across the white snow. He collapsed forward and Violet screamed, scrambling backward as his body hit the ground beside her. 3 more shots followed in rapid succession, so fast they almost sounded like one continuous roar. 3 more bodies dropped. The 5th outlaw, Jenkins, had his rifle halfway to his shoulder when a figure emerged from the swirling snow, a man in a long, dark coat moving faster than seemed possible. He closed the distance in seconds, yanking the rifle away and driving his fist into Jenkins's jaw with enough force to snap the outlaw's head sideways. Jenkins crumpled into the snow and did not move. Violet stared, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. The man stood over the bodies, a smoking Colt revolver in his right hand, his face partially hidden by his hat and the scarf wrapped around his neck. He was tall and broad-shouldered, and he had just killed 4 men in the time it took to draw breath. He turned toward her, and she flinched. Slowly, he lowered the gun and pulled the scarf down. His face was weathered and tanned, probably in his mid-20s, with sharp cheekbones and a jaw dark with stubble. His eyes were an unusual color, somewhere between gray and blue, like storm clouds over the prairie. "Are you hurt?" His voice was quiet, almost gentle, completely at odds with what she had just witnessed. "My ankle," she managed. "I fell." He holstered the gun and moved closer, his movements careful, like he was approaching a frightened animal. "My name is Zachary Owens. I am going to help you, but I need to check that ankle." "May I?" She nodded, unable to form words. He knelt beside her, his hands surprisingly gentle as he examined her boot. She winced when he touched the swollen flesh. "Not broken," he said. "Bad sprain. Can you stand if I help you?" "I think so." He supported her weight as she struggled to her feet, his arm solid around her waist. This close, she could see the exhaustion in his face, lines etched around his eyes and mouth. Blood stained his left sleeve, but he did not seem to notice. "You are hurt," she said. "Old wound, nothing fresh." He glanced at the bodies scattered in the snow. "We need to leave before the storm gets worse. My horse is just over that rise." "What about him?" She gestured to Jenkins, who was groaning and starting to stir. "He can walk to town if he survives the cold. I am not killing an unconscious man." Zachary's voice hardened. "But I will put a bullet in him if he follows us." He helped her through the deep snow, bearing most of her weight. His horse, a massive bay gelding, stood waiting with the patience of a well-trained animal. Zachary lifted her into the saddle like she weighed nothing, then swung up behind her. His arms came around her to grip the reins, and despite everything, despite the dead men and the storm and the terror still racing through her veins, she felt safe. They rode in silence, the wind screaming around them. Violet's mind kept replaying those shots, the precision and speed of them. This was not an ordinary cowboy or ranch hand. This was someone who had killed before, many times, with the kind of efficiency that came from practice and necessity. "Why did you help me?" she finally asked. "Because you needed help. You killed them without hesitation." "I recognized Dawson. I have been tracking him for 3 weeks." He paused. "He murdered a family outside Springfield, parents and 2 children. The youngest was 6 years old." The words settled heavy in the cold air. "You are a lawman." "I was. Now I just do what needs doing." The lights of Wyatt appeared through the snow like blessed salvation. The town was small, barely 3 streets clustered around a main road, but it had a doctor and a marshal and warmth. Zachary guided the horse directly to the doctor's office, a small building with smoke rising from its chimney. Dr. Hammond was an older man with kind eyes and steady hands. He examined Violet's ankle while Zachary stood by the door, watching the street like he expected trouble. The doctor wrapped the sprain tightly, gave her laudanum for the pain, and told her to stay off it for at least a week. "You will need somewhere to recover," Hammond said. "The boarding house is full with folks trapped by the storm, but I have a spare room upstairs." "My wife would welcome the company." "That is very kind." Violet looked at Zachary. "Will you stay? I need to thank you properly." Something shifted in his expression, a flicker of emotion quickly suppressed. "I should report to the marshal about Dawson." "After," she said firmly. "Please." He nodded slowly. The doctor's wife, Martha Hammond, was a plump woman with gray hair and a maternal warmth that reminded Violet painfully of her own mother. She settled Violet in a comfortable chair by the fire and brought hot coffee and stew while the doctor treated the wound on Zachary's arm, an old knife cut that had reopened. "You take terrible care of yourself, young man," Martha scolded gently. "Yes, madam." Zachary's voice held a hint of amusement when they were finally alone. Violet studied him properly. Without the coat and hat, she could see he was younger than she had first thought, maybe 25 at most. His hands were scarred, his knuckles rough and calloused. He held his coffee cup carefully, like he was afraid of breaking it. "Tell me the truth," she said. "Who are you really?" Zachary was silent for a long moment, staring into the fire. "I was a deputy marshal in Kansas Territory. 2 years ago, outlaws hit the town where I was stationed. They killed the marshal, burned half the buildings. I went after them, By the time I caught up, I was out of the jurisdiction and out of patience. I killed 3 of them in a gunfight. The 4th, I brought back to stand trial. That sounds like justice to me. The law did not see it that way. Said I had no authority outside Kansas. They took my badge. His jaw tightened. So now I hunt men like Dawson without a badge. I bring them in when I can, but most prefer to draw on me rather than hang. You were defending yourself. Maybe. Or maybe I am just good at killing, and I found a way to make it feel righteous. He looked at her then, really looked, and she saw the pain buried deep in those gray-blue eyes. A woman like you should not be associating with someone like me. A woman like me would be dead if not for you. She set down her coffee cup. My name is Violet Bradford. My father owned a small ranch until he died last year. My mother sold it and moved to St. Louis to live with her sister, but I stayed. I work at the general store and I live in a tiny room above the feed shop, and I have no prospects according to everyone in town. So tell me, Zachary Owens, what kind of woman am I supposed to be? A smile touched his lips, brief but genuine. The stubborn kind, I am thinking. Very. She smiled back. Will you stay in Wyatt for a while, at least until the storm passes? I suppose I could do that. The storm lasted 3 days, trapping everyone in town beneath a blanket of snow 2 feet deep. Zachary reported the deaths to Marshal Hendricks, who knew the Dawson Gang's reputation and seemed relieved rather than upset about the killings. Dawson's body and the others were retrieved and buried once the weather cleared. Jenkins had made it back to town somehow and was locked in the jail, awaiting transport to Kansas City for trial. Violet stayed with the Hammonds, her ankle healing slowly. Zachary took a room at the boarding house but spent most of his time at the doctor's home, claiming he was ensuring no other gang members came looking for revenge. Violet suspected he simply wanted the company. They talked for hours, sharing stories about their lives. She told him about growing up on the ranch, about her father teaching her to ride and shoot, about the loneliness that came after his death. He told her about his family in Ohio, parents and a younger sister he had not seen in 5 years, about the guilt that kept him moving from town to town hunting dangerous men. You ever think about stopping? She asked on the 3rd evening while Martha dozed in her chair and the fire crackled low. Every day. Zachary stared at his hands. But then I hear about someone like Dawson and I know I can help. I know I can stop him before he hurts more innocent people. How do I walk away from that? By letting someone else carry the burden, by living your own life. She reached across and touched his hand, feeling the rough calluses and old scars. You cannot save everyone, Zachary. He turned his hand over, his fingers curling around hers. The touch sent warmth racing up her arm. Maybe not. But I saved you. Yes, she whispered. You did. The moment stretched between them, charged with possibility. Then Martha snorted awake and they pulled apart, but something had shifted. Something had begun. When the storm finally broke, the sun emerged over a transformed landscape. Wyatt glittered beneath the snow, beautiful and pristine. Violet's ankle was much improved, and the doctor declared she could return to work within a few days. She should have been relieved. Instead, she felt a creeping dread. Zachary would leave now. Men like him always did. She found him at the stable, checking on his horse. The bay gelding, whose name she had learned was Gunner, nudged Zachary's shoulder affectionately, planning to ride out. She tried to keep her voice light, thinking about it. He did not look at her. There is a report of cattle rustlers up near Hannibal. There are always reports. There will always be outlaws. She moved closer, ignoring the twinge in her ankle. What if you stayed, Violet? Just listen. The ranch outside town, the Morrison place, they are looking for a foreman. The owner is getting too old to manage it himself. It is honest work, good pay, and you would not have to keep risking your life. She took a breath. "And I am here." He finally turned to face her. "You deserve better than a man with blood on his hands. I deserve to choose for myself." She stepped close enough to feel his warmth. "These past 3 days I have been happier than I have been in years. You are a good man, Zachary. You have done hard things, yes, but for the right reasons. That matters. I do not know how to be anything else. I have been fighting for so long." "Then learn." She reached up and touched his face, feeling the roughness of stubble beneath her palm. "Learn with me." He closed his eyes, leaning into her touch like a man starved for gentleness. "I want to. God help me, I want to." "Then stay. Please stay." When he kissed her, it was soft and careful, like he was afraid she might break. She kissed him back with all the feelings she had been holding inside, telling him without words that she was not fragile, that she could handle his past and his scars and whatever darkness he carried. His arms came around her, pulling her close, and she felt him tremble. "I will stay," he whispered against her lips. "I will try." The Morrison Ranch was a sprawling property 20 miles outside Wyatt, with good grazing land and a decent herd of cattle. Jacob Morrison was a weathered man in his 60s who had been running the place alone since his sons moved east. He took one look at Zachary, asked about his experience with horses and cattle, and hired him on the spot. "I do not care about your past," Morrison said bluntly. "I care if you can do the work and treat my animals right. Can you?" "Yes, sir." "Then you start Monday. House comes with the job, that cabin over by the north pasture. It is small but solid." Zachary moved into the cabin that weekend. It was indeed small, just 2 rooms and a fireplace, but it had good bones and a view of the rolling hills. Violet helped him clean and organize, bringing curtains and dishes from the general store where she worked. They moved around each other easily, falling into a comfortable rhythm that felt natural and right. Spring came slowly to Missouri, the snow melting into mud before the first green shoots appeared. Zachary threw himself into the ranch work with the same intensity he had once used for tracking outlaws. He rose before dawn and worked until dark, mending fences, tending cattle, breaking horses. The physical labor seemed to quiet something restless inside him. Violet visited every Sunday, riding out on a gentle mare Zachary had chosen for her. They would walk the property together, talking about everything and nothing. He told her about his sister's letters, how she was married now with a baby on the way. She told him about the customers at the store, the gossip and small dramas of town life. In May, he asked her to marry him. They were sitting by the creek that ran through the property, watching the water flow clear and cold over smooth stones. The cottonwoods were budding, and the air smelled of wet earth and growing things. "I do not have much to offer," Zachary said suddenly. "No family nearby, no fortune saved up. Just this job and that cabin and myself. But I love you, Violet. I think I have loved you since I saw you in that Snowdrift, so fierce even though you were terrified. I want to build a life with you if you will have me." Violet's eyes filled with tears. "You have everything I want. Yes, yes, I will marry you." He produced a simple gold band, his mother's ring sent by his sister when he had written asking permission to use it. It fit perfectly on Violet's finger, warm and solid. They kissed by the creek as the sun set over the hills, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. They were married in June at the small church in Wyatt, with half the town in attendance. Violet wore her mother's wedding dress, altered to fit her smaller frame, and carried wildflowers picked that morning. Zachary wore a new suit that made him look almost uncomfortable, but when he saw her walking down the aisle, his face transformed with such joy that several women in the congregation dabbed their eyes. Martha Hammond cried through the entire ceremony. Jacob Morrison stood as Zachary's witness, gruff but pleased. Even Marshal Hendricks attended, shaking Zachary's hand and telling him he had made a good choice in settling down. The cabin became their home. Violet quit her job at the general store and focused on making the small space comfortable and welcoming. She planted a garden, sewed curtains, and filled the rooms with warmth. Zachary built her shelves for books and a larger table for cooking. They were not wealthy, but they were content. The first months of marriage were an adjustment. Zachary sometimes woke from nightmares, gasping and reaching for a gun that was not there. Violet learned to wake him gently, to hold him until the dreams faded. He learned to talk about the things that haunted him, the faces of men he had killed, the family he had not been able to save. She listened without judgment, offering comfort and understanding. In return, he taught her things nobody else had bothered with. He showed her how to track animals, how to read the weather in the sky, how to gentle a skittish horse. He valued her opinions on the ranch decisions, treating her as a true partner rather than just a wife. When she suggested rotating the cattle to different pastures to preserve the grass, he implemented it immediately and praised her cleverness. One evening in late summer, they sat on the porch watching the sunset. Violet rested her head on Zachary's shoulder, his arm warm around her waist. "Are you happy?" she asked. "More than I thought possible." He kissed the top of her head. "You saved me, you know. I was disappearing into violence and vengeance. You brought me back. We saved each other." Life settled into a pattern. The ranch thrived under Zachary's management. Morrison, impressed by the improvements and increased profits, raised his salary and began talking about making him a partner. The cattle were healthy, the horses well-trained, and the land productive. Word spread, and other ranchers came to ask Zachary's advice on various matters. Violet befriended the neighboring ranch wives, women who taught her about preserving food and managing a household on the frontier. She discovered she had a talent for healing, and people began coming to her for help with minor injuries and illnesses. Dr. Hammond, pleased to have some of his burden lifted, gave her books on medicine and taught her more advanced techniques. In the fall of 1874, Violet realized she was pregnant. She told Zachary one evening after supper, watching his face carefully for his reaction. He went very still. "Truly," Dr. Hammond confirmed it today, "we will have a baby next spring." Zachary let out a whoop of joy and lifted her off her feet, spinning her around the small cabin. "A baby! We are going to have a baby!" He set her down gently, his hands immediately going to her still flat stomach. "Are you well? Do you need anything? Should you be resting more?" she laughed, delighted by his excitement. "I am fine, healthy and strong, but yes, I will need to take things easier as I get further along." He became fiercely protective during her pregnancy. He insisted she stay off horses, carried anything heavier than a plate, and worried constantly about her health. She found it endearing and exasperating in equal measure, finally having to tell him firmly that she was not made of glass. "I know," he said sheepishly. "I just cannot lose you. You and this child are everything to me." "You will not lose me. Women have been having babies since the beginning of time." But she understood his fear. He had lost so much in his life, had seen so much death. The idea of something happening to her, or the baby, terrified him in a way that facing down armed outlaws never had. Winter came again, gentler than the previous year. Violet's belly swelled, and she felt the baby moving inside her, strong kicks that made her gasp and laugh. Zachary would place his hand on her stomach, feeling their child move, wonder written across his face. The baby came on a warm April evening in 1875, attended by Dr. Hammond and Martha. It was a long labor, and there were moments when Zachary, pacing outside the cabin, thought he might lose his mind from worry. But finally, the baby's cry split the air, strong and healthy. Martha opened the door, smiling. "Come meet your son." Zachary entered the cabin on shaking legs. Violet lay in their bed, exhausted but radiant, cradling a tiny bundle wrapped in a soft blanket. She looked up as he approached, tears streaming down her face. "Meet James Zachary Owens," she whispered. The baby was perfect, with a cap of dark hair and tiny fingers that gripped Zachary's thumb when he offered it. Zachary sank down beside the bed, overwhelmed by the rush of love and protectiveness that flooded through him. "He is beautiful," he managed. "You are beautiful. Thank you, Violet." "Thank you for giving me this. We made him together," she smiled tiredly. "Our son." James was a healthy, happy baby who grew quickly. Zachary proved to be a devoted father, walking the floor with him at night when he fussed, changing diapers without complaint, and singing lullabies in a surprisingly good voice. Violet watched her husband with their son and fell even more deeply in love with him. The cabin felt smaller with a baby, so Zachary spent his evenings that summer building an addition, 2 more rooms that would give them space to grow. Morrison helped, as did several of the ranch hands who had come to respect and like their foreman. By fall, the addition was complete, and they had a proper bedroom and a nursery for James. Life continued its steady rhythm. James took his first steps at 11 months, walking straight into his father's arms. His first word was "Da," which made Zachary's eyes suspiciously bright. Violet returned to her healing work when James was old enough, bringing him along in a basket while she tended to minor medical needs in the community. In 1877, Morrison called Zachary into his house for a serious conversation. The old rancher looked tired, his movements slower than they had been. "I am getting old, son," Morrison said bluntly. "My health is not what it was. I have been thinking about the future of this ranch. Sir, I have no children who want it. My boys are happy in their city lives back east. But you have made this place thrive. You care about the land and the animals. You have built a family here." He pulled out papers. "I want to make you a full partner, split ownership 50-50. When I die, the whole thing goes to you and Violet and your children." Zachary stared at the papers. "Sir, I cannot accept this. It is too much." "It is exactly right. You have earned it with your work and your dedication. Besides, I have grown fond of you and that pretty wife of yours. You are like the son I should have had working beside me." Morrison's eyes were serious. "Will you accept?" Zachary thought of Violet and James, of the life they had built here. He thought of the man he used to be, violent and rootless, and the man he had become, settled and content. "Yes, sir, I will, and I will make you proud." They shook hands, and just like that, Zachary became a ranch owner. When he told Violet that evening, she cried happy tears and held him tight. "Your father would be so proud," she said. "A ranch owner at 27, everything you deserve. Everything we deserve. This is ours together." James grew into a lively, curious boy with his father's eyes and his mother's determination. In 1879, Violet became pregnant again. This time she was less nervous, more confident in her body's ability to bring forth new life. Their daughter, Emma Rose Owens, was born in January of 1880, a tiny thing with wispy blonde hair and a powerful set of lungs. Zachary was just as devoted to Emma as he had been to James, though his friends teased him about being wrapped around his daughter's tiny finger. He did not care. He would sit for hours with Emma sleeping on his chest, marveling at her perfection. Morrison died peacefully in his sleep in the spring of 1881. They buried him on the ranch he had loved, and Zachary grieved for the man who had given him a chance when others might have turned away. The ranch was now entirely theirs, a responsibility Zachary took seriously. Under their management, the Owens Ranch became one of the most successful in the county. They employed a dozen hands, expanded the herd, and bred horses that were sought after across Missouri. Violet's healing practice grew as well, and she became known as someone with real skill and knowledge. The cabin had expanded again, now a proper house with 4 bedrooms and a large kitchen. James, at age 6, already followed his father everywhere, learning about cattle and horses with eager enthusiasm. Emma, at 2, toddled after her brother, determined to do everything he did. They were a family, solid and loving, built on a foundation of mutual respect and genuine affection. Sometimes, late at night, Zachary would hold Violet close and think about the man he used to be. The anger and violence felt like memories from another life, someone else's story. He had not drawn his gun in anger since that day in the Snowdrift 7 years ago. The Colt stayed locked in a drawer, cleaned and maintained but not needed. "You ever miss it?" Violet asked him once. "The excitement, the danger, not for a second." He kissed her forehead. "I found something better, purpose and peace in you. I would not trade this life for anything." In 1883, their 3rd child was born, another boy they named Thomas Morrison Owens in honor of Jacob Morrison. Thomas was a calm baby, easy-going and happy, completely unlike his energetic older siblings. The house rang with children's laughter, with the sounds of family. Zachary taught James and Emma to ride, to respect the land and animals. Violet taught them to read and write, to be kind and thoughtful. They grew up knowing they were loved, secure in a home built on love and hard work. The years passed in a blur of seasons and small moments. James at 10, helping his father break horses. Emma at 7, following her mother on healing calls and learning about herbs and medicines. Thomas toddling after both siblings, adored and slightly spoiled by everyone. Zachary's hair gained threads of gray at the temples. Violet's face showed laugh lines and sun exposure, but she was still beautiful to him, still the fierce woman who had captured his heart in a snowdrift. They had built something lasting, something real. In the summer of 1885, Marshal Hendricks rode out to the ranch. Zachary, working in the north pasture, felt a moment of old worry before pushing it down. He was not that man anymore. He had nothing to fear from the law. Hendricks dismounted and shook his hand. "Zachary, good to see you, Marshal. What brings you out this way? Wanted to tell you in person." Jenkins, that outlaw from the Dawson Gang, he died in prison last month. Natural causes, apparently his lungs gave out. But before he died, he confessed to a string of crimes, including the murder of that family near Springfield. He said Dawson ordered it, but he was the one who pulled the trigger. Zachary absorbed this information. "Why are you telling me?" "Because it confirms what you always said. Dawson was a killer who needed stopping. There is nobody left who questions what you did that day. Your record is clean, Zachary, completely clean. I wanted you to know that." Something Zachary had not realized he was carrying loosened in his chest. "Thank you, Marshal. You are a good man. You built a good life here. I am glad you found peace." After Hendricks left, Zachary stood in the pasture for a long moment, feeling the sun on his face and the wind in his hair. The past was truly behind him now. The future stretched ahead, bright and full of promise. He walked back to the house and found Violet in the garden, Thomas playing at her feet while she picked vegetables. She looked up as he approached, smiling that smile that still made his heart skip. "Everything all right? Everything is perfect." He pulled her close, kissing her thoroughly while Thomas giggled. "Absolutely perfect." That evening, the whole family gathered for supper. James talked about a colt he was training. Emma showed off a drawing she had made. Thomas tried to steal food from everyone's plates and laughed when he was caught. Violet and Zachary exchanged glances across the table. communicating without words the way long married couples did. This was what Zachary had been searching for during all those years of violence and hunting. This warmth, this love, this sense of belonging. He had found it in the last place he expected, with a woman who saw past his darkness to the man he could become. After the children were in bed, he and Violet sat on the porch swing he had built, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. The prairie stretched out before them, peaceful and beautiful. "Tell me what you are thinking," Violet said softly. "I am thinking about that day in the Snowdrift, how close I came to riding past to not seeing you." He tightened his arm around her. "How different my life would be if I had." "But you did not ride past. You stopped, you helped, you stayed. That was all you, Zachary. You made those choices. We made them together." He kissed her temple. "Every day since, we have been making choices together, building this life together, and we will keep building it. Watching our children grow, maybe having more grandchildren someday, growing old together on this land we love." She looked up at him, her eyes reflecting starlight. "I love you, Zachary Owens, today, tomorrow, and always. I love you too, Violet, more than I can ever say." They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the night sounds of the prairie. Inside the house, their children slept safe and warm. The ranch stretched around them, prosperous and thriving. The past was settled, the present was rich, and the future was theirs to shape. Zachary thought back to the man he had been, empty and angry and searching for purpose in violence. That man seemed like a stranger now. He had been transformed by love and patience and the courage of a woman who believed he could be more than his worst moments. Years continued to unfold in their steady rhythm. James grew into a fine young man, taking over more responsibilities on the ranch. Emma showed such talent for healing that Dr. Hammond, now quite elderly, began teaching her everything he knew, talking about her taking over his practice someday. Thomas developed a love for horses that rivaled his father's, spending hours in the stables. In 1890, Violet and Zachary celebrated their 15th wedding anniversary. The house was full of friends and neighbors, music and laughter echoing off the walls. James, now 16, danced with several young ladies from town. Emma, 13, helped serve food with the efficiency of someone used to caring for others. Thomas, at 7, ran wild with the other children. Late in the evening, Zachary pulled Violet outside for a moment alone. The June night was warm and clear, perfect in every way. 15 years, he said wonderingly. It feels like both forever and no time at all. The best 15 years of my life. She touched his face, now fully weathered by sun and work, distinguished gray at his temples. You have given me everything I could want. You gave me a reason to want anything at all. Before you, I was just existing, moving from one fight to the next. You taught me how to live. They kissed under the stars, surrounded by the sounds of celebration from inside their home. When they returned to the party, hand in hand, their children smiled knowingly. Everyone could see the love that still burned bright between Zachary and Violet Owens. The ranch continued to prosper. By 1895, they owned over 2,000 acres and employed 20 hands year-round. The Owens name was respected throughout Missouri and beyond. Buyers came from as far as Chicago to purchase their horses and cattle, but the success never changed who they were. Zachary still woke before dawn to work alongside his men. Violet still tended to anyone who needed healing, whether they could pay or not. They raised their children with values of hard work, honesty, and compassion. James married in 1896, a sweet girl from town named Sarah, and brought her to live on the ranch. They built a house on the eastern section of property, and James took over managing that portion of the land. Within a year, Violet and Zachary became grandparents to a baby girl named Violet after her grandmother. Holding his granddaughter for the first time, Zachary felt emotions he could not name. This tiny person was his legacy, proof that the violence of his past had been redeemed into something beautiful and lasting. Emma, true to everyone's expectations, took over Dr. Hammond's practice when he retired in 1898. She was just 21, but already had more skill and knowledge than most trained physicians. The town of Wyatt was proud to have her, and patients came from surrounding counties to see the gifted young doctor. Thomas, at 16, was already being courted by other ranchers who wanted his expertise with horses. But he loved the family ranch and had no interest in leaving. He talked about breeding a new line of horses, combining speed and endurance in ways nobody had managed before. As the century drew to a close, Zachary and Violet, now in their late 40s, looked back on lives well lived. They had faced hardship and danger, loss and grief, but they had also known profound joy and deep contentment. Their love had not just endured but had grown stronger with each passing year, deepening into something unshakable. One evening in the spring of 1900, they rode out to the creek where Zachary had proposed 25 years earlier. The cottonwoods had grown tall and full, their branches creating a canopy of green. The water still flowed clear and cold over smooth stones. "Remember when this was wild land, barely settled," Violet said, dismounting with the ease of long practice. "I remember everything about those days, you in your mother's wedding dress, James taking his first steps, Emma's first word." Zachary helped her down to sit by the water. "Every moment with you has been precious. We have been blessed. A family that loves us, land that provides for us health and happiness." She leaned against him, "More than I ever dreamed of having. That day in the Snowdrift, I thought I was just saving a stranger. I did not know I was finding my salvation. We saved each other," she repeated the words from so long ago, "and we built something beautiful." They sat by the creek until sunset painted the sky in brilliant colors. Then they rode home together, to the house full of family and warmth, to the life they had created from nothing but love and determination. James and Sarah now had 3 children, and another on the way. Emma had married a teacher from town, a good man named David who supported her medical practice. Thomas was courting the daughter of a neighboring rancher, a spirited girl who could ride as well as any man. The Owens family had become a dynasty of sorts, respected and loved throughout the region. But at the heart of it all was still just Zachary and Violet, the former lawman and the rancher's daughter who had found each other in a blizzard and built forever from that moment. Years continued their march. More grandchildren arrived, filling the ranch with new generations. Zachary's hair went fully gray, then white. Violet's hands grew gnarled with arthritis, though she still tended her garden and helped with healing when she could. They moved slower, tired more easily, but their love remained vibrant and alive. On their 40th wedding anniversary in 1914, the whole family gathered, over 30 people now bearing the Owens name or married into it. They celebrated under the cottonwoods by the creek, the place where so many important moments had happened. James gave a toast, his voice carrying over the crowd. "To my parents, who taught us what love and dedication look like, who built this ranch and this family from nothing but hard work and devotion to each other. Everything we have, everything we are, comes from them." Everyone raised their glasses, and Zachary felt his throat tighten with emotion. Violet squeezed his hand, her eyes bright with happy tears. "We are so lucky," she whispered to him. "So very lucky." "Blessed," he corrected. "Blessed beyond measure." That night, lying in bed in the house they had expanded and improved over 4 decades, Zachary held Violet close. Her hair was white now, her face lined with age, but she was still the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. "I would do it all again," he said into the darkness. "Every moment, every choice, if it led me back to you." "Even the hard parts?" she asked. "Especially the hard parts. They made me who I needed to be to deserve you." "You always deserved love, Zachary. You just needed to believe it. You taught me to believe. In myself, in goodness, in the possibility of redemption and peace. You are the best thing that ever happened to me." She turned in his arms, her face close to his. "And you are mine. My rescuer, my partner, my love. Today, tomorrow, and always." They fell asleep tangled together, the way they had for 40 years, secure in the knowledge that their love would outlast even death. They had built something eternal, not just in the ranch and the family, but in the bond between them that nothing could break. Zachary Owens had once been a man defined by violence and vengeance, searching for purpose in hunting down outlaws. But on a snowy day in February 1873, he found something better than purpose. He found love, redemption, and a future worth living. And with Violet by his side, he had built a life more beautiful than any dream. The ranch would continue through their children and grandchildren. The Owens name would endure. But the real legacy was simpler and more profound. Two people who found each other in the wilderness, who chose love over fear, who built forever from a single moment of courage and compassion. And in the end, that was everything that mattered.